Well, good morning, and thank you for joining us today. I'm Todd Smith. I'm the VP of Partner Growth here at Farotech. I'm joined by Chris Carr, who's the CEO. Hey, Chris, how are you today?
Oh, good. How are you?
I'm not bad. We've got a great topic today, really cool topic. It's on why SaaS marketing is so difficult. So the first thing we just want to address is if you haven't subscribed to our podcast, we ask you to do that. We'll have instructions at the end of the video. But real quick, Chris, SaaS. What is SaaS? I've seen it spelled capital S, lowercase a, capital S. Can you just define what SaaS is for our audience?
Sure. What I mean by SaaS is basically software as a service. Now, commonly that is companies that have a software product or an online product, and they're going to try to break their payments down so that you're paying monthly payments. There are other tactics that people are doing that I would still consider SaaS, even though doesn't have that monthly payment scenario. Okay. I feel like they've rebranded a lot of that to just basically payment terms defined a word, and the word defined kind of a business.
Okay. So do you find that most SaaS companies are subscription based?
I do. Okay.
I
mean, like some of the tactics I was referring to a couple minutes ago was there's people that are going to promise to charge every single month, but then they give this tactic of, hey, you know what, you can get lifetime membership. If you just pay $150 now, you'll have it for life. I still think that would be considered SaaS. You know what I mean? Back in the day, you used to, let's say it was like Adobe Photoshop. You would go and you would download it onto your computer. A lot of what I kind of view as SaaS is, that it's cloud-based or that it's online and that you log on through your web browser. Or it could even be an app for that matter.
Okay. But yeah, that makes sense.
It's not on your desktop, and I would definitely say that it's almost 90% of it is almost always internet dependent. Not always, but mostly.
For the most part. Okay. So today we're going to talk about this blog, and the blog is actually kind of cool. I will show it to you in a second. It is specifically why SaaS marketing is so difficult. Let me show it to you.
I think you got to do the share screen on the bottom. That was the goofball thing I did.
Got it. How about that? You got it?
Yep.
So first couple things I just want you to talk about is, SaaS companies, they got a lot going on. A lot of them are either, in the reinvention stage, where they've had a product like Adobe Photoshop forever. They've sold it one particular way, but now they kind of have to reinvent to sort of, change the way that they sell. Or they're a complete startup, and they have this great idea. They've maybe been born out of another company. So as a SaaS company, what are some of the struggles that they're dealing with in terms of, from a marketing perspective?
Well, I mean, you have this. I think one of the ones that you have is you have this pay challenge, and what I mean by that is this pay cash flow challenge that you have when you first start up. What I mean by that is that if you are, I think we talked about this in a previous blog. If you go and you are a company that is going to get, let's say that it was Photoshop, and the old method of payment was, let's say it was like $300 or $500 for Photoshop. It's pretty expensive. What would happen here is that if you got that sale, even though there was a bigger barrier because someone's not always just has $500 just sitting, in their back pocket, you're going to get that sale and you're going to get all $500. But if you're Adobe now, you're going to say, hypothetically, you're selling it for $20 a month. I'm just using that as a round number, $50 a month. To get to $500, that same $500, that's 10 months that you didn't have the same cash flow as the original scenario.
Okay. So,
all right.
But the flip side is it might take a little longer to sort of get that initial investment. But now you've sort of kept the longer, so that lifetime value, might be more profitable for the company.
Absolutely. Okay. And, I also think it helps with retention as well, because, like, you ever been to like Planet Fitness or anything like that, or you're aware of the model?
Yeah. I try not to work out, but yeah.
It's almost in a scenario where like, it's only $10, right?
Right. So why not? Yeah.
Why not? You know what I mean? They're literally serving pizza in the Planet Fitness because they just know, like, you know what?
Isn't that a little counterproductive?
Yeah. It's like, but there was one by my house. It was my backup gym. And it was one of those ones where I paid the bill for a year because I barely ever went. but I was in a scenario where, like you couldn't justify even driving there. It would cost me more in gas.
Yeah. Well, you just like the little keychain that you had, like that
I know, exactly.
people knew that you went to the gym. All right. So back to this marketing perspective in the blog, we talk about there's three major problems with why SaaS marketing is so difficult. The first one is the financial mismatch. And you talk about, before SaaS companies were a thing, they would create software, right? So what's this financial mismatch you're talking about?
Well, that was actually what we just talked about here.
Okay, gotcha.
Financial mismatch in the cash flow.
The long-term cash flow strategy. Gotcha.
Exactly. And so let's say hypothetically you are a startup, right? And you crush it. And you get 10 sales this month. If it's $50, right? Like 10 times $50 isn't going to get you very far, but 10 times $500. You know what? Depending on the size of your team, that's pretty good. That might be a pretty good week.
Gotcha.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so what I find is that a lot of these SaaS companies, when they come onto the market, it's almost really important that they have like a venture capital firm or at least go through a couple of rounds of financing. You just don't have the runway or to finance it yourself when you haven't had a critical mass in membership.
Gotcha.
You know what I mean?
That makes perfect sense.
It becomes,
Okay.
I mean, cash is king in any business. We've had this business for 19 years. And you still have scenarios where cash is king, even despite where we're at. You know what I mean? So
definitely. The other approach that you talked about in terms of a problem is the silver bullet marketing approach. What do you mean by that? Like silver bullet, I think like, hey, I think silver bullet. And I'm like, hey, I'm just going to shoot the silver bullet. It's going to solve all my marketing problems.
That's right.
What's the problem with silver bullet?
That's right. Well, let me just kind of show you what I'm talking about is that when we go and we start talking about silver bullet marketing, what I mean is my screen showing? Yeah.
Yeah, I can see it. Yep.
So normally what happens here is a client will say, you know what, for my SaaS company, it's going to be critical for me to get on the first page of Google, or it's going to be critical for me to be really strong in social.
Gotcha.
And if there's one thing we've learned is that, you're one algorithm change away from losing everything. You don't control these platforms. You don't control Facebook. You don't control Google or anything like that. Is it important to do all those things? Yes. But like what I believe is that anytime you get into marketing, you got to diversify your approach. And it also has to be an approach. This is what we call our unique process. But essentially what I'm trying to say is that when you do marketing, when marketing is done right, it goes into a system. So we don't believe in independent solutions. We believe in a system. And when a system is done right, every lead that you generate, you nurture and you close and you ask for referrals, that becomes the next referral becomes the next lead. And it becomes what we go from a funnel to a flywheel. So it self-perpetuates itself. If you're just an SEO, you're never going to close that loop. You're always going to be hunting, or you're always going to be trying to re-optimize your way, you know what I mean, into it. So let me kind of walk through what we believe a good approach is going to look like. Give me 1 second here. I'm having a little bit of technical difficulties. What I mean by that is that first off, we're going to develop what we call a gap assessment. Gap assessment is going to allow you to understand who your target audience is, take a really deep dive. Then you're going to go into something called usability conversion analysis. Now that's going to be good for SaaS companies too, because what I want to be able to do with that is that's kind of the heat mapping. That's the scroll mapping. That's looking at all of the science behind conversion of what's going on with your usability. Then obviously we're going to talk about SEO. You should have a content strategy to establish yourself as a thought leader. You got lead nurturing, which is probably the most neglected part of the entire system when clients come to us. You have social media, but social media you can't do in a vacuum. You almost always have to connect that with paid social or paid advertising. And then I would always recommend to try to get that emotional experience to get into some video development as well. And then you want to also make sure that your company is making decisions based upon data. It's what we call data-driven decisions. So that's what an entire system sort of looks like. And the SaaS companies that we work with, we have plenty of them. They usually come in to me totally bent on, hey, I got to be good at one thing. And we try to convert them into saying, you know what? I just don't want you to build your house on sand.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And then what are you seeing like in terms of SaaS companies? Are you seeing them like running kind of lean in the marketing perspective, or are you seeing like big marketing departments, or what's that typically looking like?
No, I mean, commonly it's lean and they're doing that silver bullet marketing.
Gotcha.
Or they're using multiple different vendors.
Okay.
And that could be just as bad. What I mean by that is like, if you have multiple different vendors, which is fine because they're subject matter experts in each other space, that's totally fine. But every time you make a change, you have to call 5 different vendors, or you can try to get the vendors to work with each other. And we do that a lot. You know, I work with clients that have multiple vendors, and we play nice in the sandbox, but the speed of communication is always lagging, and you're just hoping that the other vendors feel the same way you do. And it can get really, it more often than not, I like to keep everything under one roof. The challenge is very few agencies have things under one roof. They're going to sell that to you, but they're going to outsource most of it. And we worked really hard to outsource very, very little.
Okay. That makes perfect sense. Any final thoughts on SaaS marketing? Obviously, you know, the difficulty comes from like the speed at which the information's moving, constant, competition coming into the market. You know, anything else that you think our audience needs to know from a difficulty perspective and how to overcome that?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think one of the things that you want to do is you want to try to develop a 3 to 5 year roadmap. If you have a venture capital firm or you're trying to apply for a level of financing, they want to know not only where you're at, but where you're going.
Right. That makes sense.
The race that you want to be able to do is trying to find that critical mass of clientele that's going to pay not only for your overhead, but also for your growth. Gotcha. And so what's going to happen that we kind of recommend is develop. We do something with our SaaS clients. It's called a gap assessment. The gap assessment is a 2-month deep dive, and it's a strategic approach. It's a 3 to 5 year roadmap to 5x or 10x your leads and opportunities. So at the end of the day, with all the science of marketing and all the art that comes down to marketing, it's still a numbers game.
Yeah, definitely.
I got to know how many leads turn into a client. I'm going to turn how many clients, how many visits turn into a lead, how many leads turn into a client, and then therefore how many visits turn into a client.
Okay.
I know we've talked about that before.
Yeah, we certainly have. Yeah.
Yep.
And then do you see, different like social media channels as a huge opportunity for SaaS?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. If it's business to consumer, it's going to be really important that you're going to be, that you do that. I believe that a lot of the things you're trying to do with social media has to do a lot with what we call interruption marketing. Okay. So one of the challenges that you have sometimes as a SaaS company is you're solving a unique problem. The problem is that so many people don't even know that problem's been solved. And so they rarely search for a solution to that problem. They just assume that problem's always there. And so what happens is that a lot of these software companies come in and they're disrupting an industry, but they have very little SEO search volume.
Right.
Nobody's really looking to have this thing solved. Sometimes they're solving something that, you know what I mean? That,
yep.
You can finish my sentence here. They're solving a problem they didn't even know they had.
Definitely. So because they have no search volume, they have no domain authority, right?
Yeah.
So that's a major issue because nobody's looking for them. And then even if somebody's looking for them, they're not ranking.
Yep. And so what you got to do then is you got to try to take more of a disruption or an interruption marketing approach. So what you're going to do is you're going to make sure you work really hard to get a really good target audience. Mm-hmm. You work in things like Facebook and other platforms to develop a lookalike audience. Gotcha. And then when they're going out and they're living their life, you're going to find companies who might be a good fit. And then you're going to try to interrupt their pattern. Gotcha. So we have a potential client and they have probably one of the most innovative, how would you describe what OME Gear is doing? How would you describe what that is?
It's basically a new spin on a, travel, backpack, beach, chair, lounge type device. That's a kind of a 1 in 5 type solution. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So what we found, we go to the beach, I got kids, and lugging all that stuff to the beach is the worst.
Yeah. Or watching your wife lug it. That's horrible.
So what this OME bag does is not only is it a chair, but it also it's built with like a net on it. And so it's going to carry all of your stuff. And then they spent almost 20 years working on the wheels and doing all that really cool stuff.
So it goes across the sand smoothly.
Yeah. You know what I mean? All that stuff. But a lot of times people, it's also like military grade. Like they're trying to sell to the military. That's how robust and awesome it is. The thing is though, is that very few people are going to have that search that says, hey, you know what? That's a problem I need to solve.
Right.
They might be searching at a, how do I describe it? Like at a $20 solution level, but they're not trying to solve it at a robust level that's going to have high integrity and do all that stuff.
Yeah.
So if I know that search might not be critical for them, I mean, I think it would be critical for them, but not as critical as, let's say hypothetically they found a competitor, and let's say hypothetically that competitor or that target audience is someone that likes products by like Yeti.
Mm-hmm.
What I would do is I would be able to find out who are the audiences that really are brand loyal, not brand loyal, but really like Yeti's quality and their service and the integrity of their products. And then what I do is I strategically market to that audience through interruption marketing.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's almost like you're cherry picking someone else's audience.
Okay, good. That makes a lot of sense. Any last closing thoughts you have for our audience, specifically as it relates to the difficulty of SaaS marketing?
Yeah. It's always, and I get this question, there's always a lot of bias. Yeah. Marketing is moving so fast.
Yeah.
And that you can try to handle it with one guy or one person or trying to handle it internally. But I think you and I were talking before, there's one blog for every 7 people on the planet.
Yeah.
That's insane.
So
unless your internal staff member knows how to communicate your products and service, you're literally a needle in a stack of needles. Mm-hmm. So you're going to need a subject matter expert that knows how to win, knows how to get eyeballs on it, knows the most modern approaches to do that. Okay. And what I would recommend is that you kind of leave it in the hands of the pros, because it's going to, you're going to save time and ultimately you're going to save money.
Gotcha. And not only that, but if you've taken on VC money or you have investment, like you've got to show a return in a short amount of time, or those investors are going to back out or want their money back. Correct. So there is not only this rush to get orders and succeed, but you've got even more pressure because you've got outside money that you gotta make good on.
That's right.
Cool.
That's right.
All right. Well, thank you very much for your time. It was great talking about it. I love this whole conversation just because it really shows the comprehensive nature of the solution. And it's not so much a solution, but it's more system based in terms of longevity and being able to make adjustments and really help clients achieve their goals.
Yep. I agree. I agree. Right. Awesome. More to come. All right.
Yeah, thank you for your time. Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast, and we appreciate you today. Thank you.
All right. Thanks again.